Michelle, this month, Oz Perkins' horror movie, The Monkey, hits theaters.
Based on the Stephen King short story of the same name.
Yeah. Now, we have some comic projects we want to work on, but it's been a minute since I've done that digitally, and I thought it might be good practice to do our own partial adaptation of that King story and turn out, I don't know, maybe just a couple of pages of horror comics.
I think that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah. The first thing we had to do was come up with some sort of script. So we dug out my well-thumbed copy of Stephen King's Skeleton Crew.
Yeah.
This was used when I got it, by the way. I didn't do that. And we both gave The Monkey a read-through.
I hadn't read it before. Good, scary story.
Glad you liked it. So we picked out some parts of the story that we both thought would be fun to illustrate, and we did some light manipulation of King's text and put together kind of a script. For this next part of the video, I'm going to be using Clip Studio Paint.
Okay.
And I'll try to post which tools I'm using as I use them. But before I even opened that app, I used our script to sketch some roughs, scan them in, and drop them into my file.
I know that's just the rough.
Yeah.
But the monkey is both goofy and unsettling.
Well, you know, that's my brand. That's the public face of the studio, Michelle.
Yeah.
Goofy and unsettling.
That's why I work here.
Yeah, and I think it plays well in the heartland.
I really enjoy laughing nervously.
Well, I enjoy that vibe too.
Yeah.
And I think that some of that comes from the fact that I've been reading horror comics since I was but a wee baby.
A baby?
Yeah, a baby. Well, I was 8 or 9
Okay.
when I was reading House of Mystery, House of Secrets, Witching Hour. I remember reading Creepy and Eerie, the black and white horror magazines, off the magazine racks while my mom shopped unawares.
Yeah.
And they were straight up dismembering people in those.
At that age, maybe I was reading Casper the Ghost comics.
Yeah, me too.
But I don't think I ever read House of Mystery. Were they scary?
Oh, yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And they were anthology books, maybe like 3 stories in a book.
Okay.
Little terrifying morality plays, kind of like The Twilight Zone. But there was sometimes some edgy body horror and psychological terror.
At 8?
Yeah, I mean, look, what are you going to do?
Good
My
Lord.
parents didn't know it would scar me for life.
Guess so.
There was one story where there a bunch of minks, you know, the little animals.
Yeah.
They pushed a guy into a coat making machine and skinned him alive.
Wow.
Yeah.
That never happened in the Casper comics.
Probably not.
No.
So at this point, I have created my panels.
Okay.
Each panel has its own folder, and I've moved each sketch into its respective folder. And now I can start inking.
So I might have gotten a late start on horror comics.
Yeah.
But you and I have burned through a bunch of them at this point.
We really have.
And this story, The Monkey, seems like a great choice for this treatment.
Yeah, we should talk about the monkey.
Okay.
Without spoiling anything, the story centers around one of those vintage monkey toys that have tiny little symbols.
Yeah.
And when you wind them up, they clap them together.
Right.
And in the story, when the symbols clap together, something awful happens.
Right? And it's not like anyone has any control over when the monkey toy claps his symbols.
Exactly. It's a cursed object story.
Yeah.
Think like Monkey's Paw or The Picture of Dorian Gray or The Mangler, which is another Stephen King story.
Or Annabelle or Oculus,
Right.
if we're talking about movies.
Right. Basically, there's an object, in this case, a wind-up monkey, and it's the source of all kinds of chaos.
Some bad stuff.
Okay, so this is another page. We're doing 2 pages of comics. Not the whole story, just 2 pages.
Right.
Because I have a nap I want to get in.
Okay.
And I wanted to point out that sometimes my pencil sketches are very loose, very sloppy.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I'll tighten things up in Clip Studio Paint with a blue pencil.
And then once you get the blue pencil down, you add another layer and ink it.
Yeah. And in case it's not obvious, I'm using a stylus and a tablet so I can vary the weight of these lines.
I always wanted a treehouse when I was a kid.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Would you want a secret honeycomb hideout up in the trees where you could hang your dreamy teen magazine posters of Bob Goulet?
Bob Goulet! Yes!
And Rip Taylor?
Oh, my favorite.
Oh, about this treehouse.
Yeah.
I was doing the sketches,
Rip Taylor.
working on the layout, and I drew a regular treehouse in a regular backyard tree.
Yeah.
Then I double-checked our script. 30 feet!
That's up there.
That treehouse, according to Stephen King's story, sits 30 feet above the ground.
That's a lot of climbing.
That's a 3-story drop.
Yeah.
What responsible parent would risk their child climbing 30 feet into the air to hang out in some ramshackle hut they nailed to a tree?
I don't know.
Right?
Maybe he's not their favorite kid.
Oh, well, obviously.
You think this scene's in the movie?
You know, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Because everybody knows sometimes the movie takes off in a different direction than the book.
Right? Famously, Kubrick altered quite a bit of The Shining.
That's
and
right.
Stephen King was not a fan of the movie.
Not a fan, that's right.
Yeah.
And even though I don't really want to know anything about the movie before we see it, I did do a little snooping on IMDb.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I will only say this. A, Rip Taylor's not in it.
Good. Okay.
B, there are character names in the movie that match the character names in the short story.
Ah.
So they're probably using at least the skeleton of King's story to get things rolling. There's also a lot of people in the IMDb listing whose character names have not yet been revealed.
Huh.
Now, having read the story, you know, there's not a lot of, there's really only a handful of characters.
Right.
And none of them are any sort of super secret reveals that you'd have to hide that from your potential audience.
Yeah.
So I don't know what Oz Perkins is planning. I will only say that I trust Oz Perkins.
Yeah, just about everything this guy has done we like.
Yeah.
The Black Coat's Daughter was amazing, dark, suspenseful.
Yeah, and there was kind of a clever twist to it that wasn't immediately apparent.
Right.
Also, let me just remind you of I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House.
Oh my God.
That movie.
So good.
I know that gets a lower rating online.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a tense, slow build with a great reveal.
I could watch that again right now.
Yeah. Also, I know you haven't seen it. Gretel and Hansel was solid.
And he wrote The Girl in the Photographs, and we like that.
Yeah.
We haven't seen Long Legs yet, but it gets pretty good reviews.
Yeah, I think Oz Perkins does a great job with most of the stuff he tackles, so I'm assuming he'll do a nice job of adapting this King story.
I think so too.
Oh, and also, he was a great young Norman in Psycho 2.
Oh, yeah.
Alongside his dad. Okay, so as I finish this up and add color to it in Affinity Photo, I'm going to quickly go over some guidelines I like to use for myself when I make a comic like this.
Okay.
These aren't rules. They are barely suggestions because there are dozens of ways of doing this, and you kind of got to find what works best for you.
Oh, yeah, right.
But maybe you want to use this as maybe a starting point. First, when you're filling in your flats, you can use the lasso tool with anti-aliasing turned off to select your area and then flood fill with the paint bucket tool. However, I often just use the pixel tool,
Okay.
the anti-aliasing turned off, to draw that same selection in color that I'm going to be using, and then I flood fill in the same way. Does it save me time? Just a little, because for me it's easier to see if I've gone off course or missed a spot if I'm actually drawing that selection in color and not with the barely visible selection tool. And finally, you saw I did the lettering fairly late in my process.
Yeah.
That's because I kind of know how much lettering will fit in the panels that I planned. But if you're not used to doing it, you could end up writing a script that has way too many words, and then those words don't give your artwork enough space to breathe.
Okay.
So if it's your first time trying something like this, maybe script it out and letter it first, even before you set your panels, so you can see whether you need more room for your illustration, or bigger or smaller panels, or more or fewer words.
Good idea.
But again, all of this is up to you. There are literally dozens of ways to do this. All right, now that business is out of the way,
Yeah.
let's take a look at our project.
Yeah, and if you haven't read the story, this is your spoiler warning.
Yeah, 2 pages of horror comic adapting some of Stephen King's story, The Monkey, as performed by our old pal, voice actor Owen McCuen.
The Monkey. Hey, neat. When Hal Shelburne saw it, when his son Dennis pulled it out of a moldering carton that had been pushed far back under one attic eave, such a feeling of horror and dismay rose in him that for one moment he thought he would scream. The monkey glimmered up at him from his older son's hands, grinning its old familiar grin, its brass cymbals motionless. You can't be here, he whispered. I threw you down the well when I was 9. That was the day Johnny McCabe died, and it was the monkey's fault. Well, go on, Hal dared it. Go on, clap them. It struck the bottom with a thud, and that must have jogged its clockwork. Suddenly, the cymbals did begin to beat. Johnny had been climbing the rungs up to his treehouse in his backyard.
Drop the anchor.
Drop the anchor! Anchor's out, Captain! I see a ship on the horizon, Captain! What should we do?
Ready the cannon.
The two of them had spent many hours up there that summer playing pirate, seeing make-believe galleons out on the lake, unlimbering the cannons, preparing to board. Johnny had been climbing up to the treehouse as he had done 1,000 times before. And the rung just below the trap door in the bottom of the treehouse had snapped off in his hands, and Johnny had fallen 30 feet to the ground and had broken his neck. When the phone rang, when Aunt Ida's mouth dropped open and then formed an O of horror, as her friend Millie from down the road told her the news. When Aunt Ida said, "Come out on the porch, Hal. I have to tell you some bad news," he had thought with sick horror. The monkey. What's the monkey done now?
If the movie doesn't open up exactly like that, I'll be greatly disappointed.
I know if he sees this,
Yeah.
Oz Perkins is going to recall all the prints they sent out to theaters.
Oh, no doubt.
So he can reshoot the first 5 minutes of the film.
It's the only thing that makes sense.
Yes.
All right. Thank you to everyone who stuck it out to the end here.
Yes.
I think there are some useful tips in here if you're just learning to make comics digitally, and I hope it was fun.
What was that?
You hear? Oh, God.
What?
God, I think it's... oh, no, wait.
What?
I'm wearing castanets. I'm teaching a flamenco dance class later. I forgot. I forgot. See? Teaching a bunch of chimpanzees.